Okay, this is a video tutorial about using a crochet cast on, which is a knitting cast on, in order to add stitches to the left side of your work. Now, if you wanted to add stitches to the right side, it's pretty straightforward. You would just chain the number of stitches that you wanted and pick up the back loops of those chains and then continue with your work. Left side or middle increase is easy too. You just insert stitches in between the posts or under the posts, however it is that your pattern calls for. But left side increases, when you're actually trying to add stitches off to the left, is a little bit more difficult, more challenging. And the couple of resources that I've come across all call for the simple cast on, the knitting simple cast on, which is essentially taking your yarn and making what they call an E-loop and just draping it over the needle or the hook like that. But the problem with that kind of cast on, to me anyway, is that this bottom edge here becomes quite flimsy, and it separates out when you're trying to do the return row. For me anyway, I'm sure that other people are much more talented at it. Anyway, since that E-loop method or simple cast on is not working for me, I came up with another solution that maybe will help somebody else, and that is the crochet cast on. Now, the crochet cast on is literally done with a crochet hook, and usually it's over a knitting needle, but in this case we're going to crochet onto a crochet hook. So in order to do that, take another crochet hook. In this case I'm using an H hook and this is a J hook, but you would usually use similar size hooks, but I'm going to use another size hook just because I can. So what you're going to do is you're going to turn your hook this way, and in Tunisian we don't usually turn our hooks, but in this case we're going to. And I have found that the easiest way for me to do this is to take your crochet hook and slide it through the back of this last loop that you made. Okay? Grab the working yarn, yarn over, and draw up a loop. Okay, now in the crochet cast on with knitting needles, you usually start with a slip knot on the crochet hook. Since you can't really do a slip knot since the working yarn's already on the Afghan hook, in this case, by pulling up this loop, it kind of acts as that slip knot. Okay, then chain one. Now, you wouldn't normally do that when you're casting on, but in this case, I found that you're going to lose that very last bottom chain when you get to the last stitch. So by chaining one, I add it back in. And I'll show you what I mean by that. And the actual cast on is just reach around, grab that yarn, and draw it through the loop. Okay? Then you take the working yarn, move it to the back, grab the yarn, pull it through, move the working yarn to the back, grab the yarn, pull it through, move the working yarn to the back. Now, I wanted to add on 5 stitches, but I'm going to stop with these 4, and I'm going to pull this loop out, and I'll show you why. Okay? All right. Oops, I only added 3. I guess I better add one more. Okay, so I'm going to grab the yarn, pull it through, and now I'm going to stop. Okay, now let's look. Okay, so here are all of my original stitches, and here are the ones that I added. 1, 2, 3, 4. This one hanging right here is actually going to be just added to the hook like so. Pull on the working yarn, and there's your 5th one. And that's why I didn't add a 5th one, because I knew that the loop that I pulled down would be the 5th stitch. So let's see what it looks like on the underside. I'm just going to push this out of the way real quick so you can get a good view. Let me try and zoom in on this. Okay, hopefully you can see that okay. Underneath there are 5 chains. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In which I can now go back and add trim to. If I'd used the E-loop method, I would have had just one loop along the bottom, and they may or may not have been spread out. And going back and making a trim selection on top of that would have been a bit awkward for me anyway. So this method works better for me. And if you are one of the people that find the simple cast on to be a little bit too flimsy, then this might be something to try. Okay, so let's turn our work back over now. And zoom back out a little bit. Sorry, I'm not the best videographer in the world. Okay, so now let's do the return row. And it's just as normal. Yarn over and draw through 1. Sorry, yarn over and draw through 2. Yarn over and draw through 3, 4, 5, and so on and so forth all the way to the end. Pull that out of the way so you can see what your work now looks like. And there are your extra stitches. Okay, so here's the very last one over here, and it's going to kind of get drawn over there because you you inserted your hook behind it. So when you come back through, just make sure you kind of pull it to the side, that last stitch, because otherwise it'll get buried in there. Now, the one different thing about doing this crochet cast on is that although it's a little bit difficult to see in the video, I'm sure, here where the stitches are added, the front loop and the back loop do not line up exactly. They're just a little bit off kilter. So the back loops are just a little bit off, they're like shifted to the left a little bit. So when you pick up this row, if you're doing purl stitches here or knit stitches or whatever, do these stitches as normal, as the pattern calls for or in the pattern that you've been working. Here, just go knitwise through the middle of them and keep picking them up until the very end, as if you were picking up the first forward pass, the first foundation row. Okay, so in this case, I'll just knit off the whole row. Make sure you can see this okay. And don't forget that that last one's going to be just a little bit off. Okay, so there's my first 10. Now for these, they're going to be just a little bit off. So just pick them up knitwise. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then pick up the last one as you would normally pick up a last stitch. Oops. That doesn't want to cooperate. There we go. Okay, see that? And then yarn over, draw through 1, and draw through 2, and so on and so forth as any normal return row. Okay. And now your added stitches are quite evident. And any future stitches can be just done in the regular pattern that you are working. Plus, you have the added benefit of being able to make stitches up this side and across this way. And that's the crochet cast on, and it's still a work in progress. So I've just started experimenting with that. I think it's going to work well. But hopefully that'll help somebody as much as I think it's going to help me. And if you give it a try, please let me know.